You can bring the world of Jujutsu Kaisen into your Dungeons & Dragons campaign by playing as the Jujutsu Sorcerer, Gojo. And this is how you can do it. First, you gotta start with the race. We're gonna go with Variant Human because this gives us a feat right at first level, but we'll cover that feat in just a second. Then you gotta choose a background, and that's where it gets a little more complicated because you could go with something like a Quandrix student, which would expand your spell list, but I wanna optimize a bit. And one of the best ways to optimize this is by going with a wild spacer. And thinking of wild spaces as the domain expansions is how you're going to wind up justifying this. Being a wild spacer gives you a feat right when you take this background. It grants you the feat Tough, so you have an extra 2 hit points of health per level of this overall build. It also grants you skills in athletics and survival. Then when it comes to some stats, for this build, we're going to rely on a few different ability scores, so we need a point spread that looks like this. Then we get to boost up our dexterity and charisma thanks to our racial choice, and then between the stats that we have and the fact that we're playing as a Jujutsu Kaisen sorcerer, I feel like it only makes sense for us to go with a sorcerer for our starting class. And then when you choose... Wait, what's going on with my video here? That's weird. What's going on?
Hi. Yeah, that was me. But I just... Wait, what the... This feels a bit one-sided. Haha, that's better.
What the hell is this? Wait, you're the ugly goblin. You can't just jump into people's videos, turning them into mind flayers like it's Baldur's Gate or something.
I can, and I did, because... Wait, you're really gonna make Gojo a sorcerer? Isn't that like a little on the nose?
Well, I don't have a nose anymore now that you turned it into weird face tentacles, but Sorcerer was a great fit for a Jujutsu Sorcerer, and I have a great build lined up.
We'll have to see about that. Maybe I'll go build Gojo too, but like even better.
Well, I'm sure yours is going to be great, but I think this is going to turn out awesome. Now, can you turn me back so I can finish the build?
Nope. I actually have an appointment now. I've got to go make my Gojo better than your Gojo. So, have fun being a tentacle face.
Seriously? Well, why Mind Flayer of all things? Of course the Discord voted for this. Might as well continue the build anyways. So like I was saying, our starting class is going to be a sorcerer, which gives us saving throws in Constitution and Charisma. Constitution is especially helpful because it helps us concentrate on spells, and then you get to choose 2 skills. We'll go ahead and grab Arcana and Persuasion. Also at first level of Sorcerer, you get to choose a Sorcerer subclass, otherwise known as a Sorceress Origin. And with how Gojo uses his abilities, especially with creating infinite space, making him almost unhittable, I think the best Sorcerer subclass is going to be a Clockwork Soul. He gets down to some nitty-gritty ideas of physics and the idea of infinity itself. And I think this subclass works best for that. At first level of this subclass, you get Restore Balance. So your connection to the plane of absolute order allows you to equalize chaotic moments. So when a creature you can see within 60 feet of you has to roll a d20 with advantage or disadvantage, you can use your reaction to prevent that roll from being affected by either of them. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, regaining all uses when you finish a long rest. Also at first level of Sorcerer, you get the obvious spell casting. Because you're a sorcerer, of course you're going to be able to cast some spells. Then at second level of Sorcerer, you get Font of Magic, granting you sorcery points. You now have a number of sorcery points equal to your level in Sorcerer. You can use them to regain some spell slots, or once you hit third level in Sorcerer, you can spend those sorcery points on Metamagic. And you can even cash in your spell slots for more sorcery points. Metamagic is going to allow you to alter your spells in unique ways, but we're going to save that for the end of this build. Also at third level of Sorcerer, you get access to second level spell slots, and then at fourth level of Sorcerer, you get an ability score improvement, so we're going to go ahead and boost up our Charisma by 2 points, and then at fifth level of Sorcerer, you get access to third level spells, and at sixth level, you get another feature from being a Clockwork Soul, called Bastion of Law. You can tap into the grand equation of existence, and as an action, you can expend anywhere from 1 to 5 sorcery points. This creates a magical ward around yourself or another creature if you want. And this is going to amplify the idea of you having infinite space around you so enemies can't technically hit you. This ward around you represents a number of d8s equal to the number of sorcery points that you spent to create it. So whenever you or whoever's warded takes damage, you can expend a number of those hit dice to reduce the overall damage. Then at 7th level of Sorcerer, you get access to 4th level spells, and at 8th level of Sorcerer, you get another ability score improvement. So let's go ahead and boost up our Charisma one more time. Then at 9th level of Sorcerer, you get access to 5th level spells, and at 10th level, you get to choose another Metamagic, which again, we're going to cover a little later. Then at 11th level of Sorcerer, you get access to 6th level spells, and at 12th level of Sorcerer, you get another ability score improvement. So we're finally going to go ahead and max out our Charisma. Then at 13th level of Sorcerer, you get access to 7th level spells, and at 14th level, you get another feature from being a Clockwork Soul called Trance of Order. So as a bonus action, you can align your own consciousness with the endless calculations of Mechanus, which actually really fits with Gojo because he's able to just infinitely calculate tons of possibility. Using this bonus action allows you to enter this conscious state for 1 minute. While that's active, attack rolls against you can't benefit from advantage. And whenever you make an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, you can treat any roll of a 9 or lower as a 10, almost like you're kind of creating your own domain expansion. You can only use this once per long rest, but you can expend 5 sorcery points if you really want to use it again. Then at 15th level of Sorcerer, you get access to 8th level spell slot. Now I was going to keep going with Sorcerer, but there's only 2 more things you can get from continuing in Sorcerer. One, you'll get a 9th level spell slot, but the only spell that I thought might fit from 9th level of Sorcerer is Time Stop. And the downside of Time Stop is the second you affect anybody else while time is frozen, the spell immediately ends. So it's not quite as useful, especially for Gojo. And then if you were to hit 18th level of Sorcerer, you get another feature from your Clockwork Soul, but it's mostly like healing others, and I don't feel like that's particularly Gojo-esque. So we're gonna do a multi-class. And there's a reason I put a decent amount of points into Intelligence other than the fact that Gojo's pretty smart, and that's because I want to dive into Wizard. Multi-classing into Wizard does give you access to the Wizard spell list, but it also gives you Arcane Recovery. So once per day when you finish a short rest, you can choose an expended spell slot to recover. The spell slot can have a combined level that's equal to or less than half of your Wizard level. Round it up. Then at 2nd level of Sorcerer, you get an Arcane Tradition. And the School of Abjuration would be great because that creates a shield that you can constantly use, just like the infinite space you're creating, but there's some special wizard spells you can only get if you choose a particular Arcane Tradition. And the curse techniques that Gojo is able to pull off heavily rely on creating a pushing or pulling force, essentially controlling gravity. So I'm going to choose the Arcane Tradition, Graviturgy. This gives you the feature Adjust Density, so you can magically alter the weight of one object or creature that you can see within 30 feet of you. You can either cut the target's weight in half or double it for 1 minute. If a creature's weight is cut in half, the creature's speed increases by 10 feet, and it can jump twice as far as normal, but it has disadvantage on all strength checks and strength saving throw. However, if the creature's weight is doubled, the creature's speed is reduced by 10 feet, and it has advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. You're going to take your levels of Wizard all the way to 5th level, which brings you to 20th level overall. But that will give us 1 more ability score improvement, which we can throw into Dexterity to boost up our armor class, and it gives us access to 3rd level Wizard spells. And speaking of the spells, let's go ahead and dive into the Metamagic and the spell list. I'm going to cover just the important ones here, but if you want the full spell list, feel free to check out my Patreon, where I have the character sheet for all of my builds. As far as the Metamagic goes, don't forget you can always turn sorcery points into more spell slots, or vice versa. It only costs you a bonus action, and sometimes having those additional spell slots can be very useful, especially if you're already concentrating on a different spell that you don't really want to worry about any other casting. So if you want to improve that infinite space around yourself by casting Shield, but you're running low on spell slots, you can then trade your sorcery points for more spell slots on your turn. It only costs a bonus action, and you can still do plenty of attacking afterward. But if you're not spending it to regain some spell slots, you can spend it on Metamagic options. You have a total of 3 Metamagic options you can choose thanks to how many levels we have in Sorcerer. The top 2 you never want to miss out on are twin spells. So if you have a spell that only targets one creature and doesn't have a range of self, you can spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level, and then you can immediately target a second creature. The other great Metamagic option I always make sure to grab is Quicken Spell. This makes it so any spell that takes 1 action to cast, you can spend 2 sorcery points to cast it as a bonus action instead. Then the last option I would grab is Heightened Spell. It just makes it so if you have a spell that requires a saving throw from your enemy, it can force them to roll at disadvantage. When it comes to actual spells, I would grab Sapping Sting just because it's a special cantrip that's usually only available for being a Graviturgy wizard. It basically sucks the life out of a creature and knocks them prone. But other cantrips I would grab are Blade Ward to amp up the idea of having a barrier around yourself, and Sword Burst to deal force damage all around you. When it comes to actually getting into non-cantrip spells, we already mentioned you want to grab Shield for that infinite space around yourself to avoid getting hit in the first place, but of course you want to make sure you actually have some armor in place as well, so also grab Mage Armor. Gojo doesn't do a ton of elemental specific damage most of the time. It's mostly about pushing and pulling enemies in weird ways, so I would try to avoid any purely elemental damage. Instead, focus on things like force, with spells like Magic Missile, or really screw with people's gravity with things like Magnify Gravity. You can make yourself even less likely to hit with the spell Blur, which just forces everybody to have disadvantage when attacking you, which can actually synergize with Trance of Order, because Trance of Order makes it so they can't have advantage, and advantage would negate this disadvantage they would have from Blur. But since Trance of Order makes it so they can't have advantage in the first place, now they will always have disadvantage no matter what. Then whenever somebody is brought into your domain expansion, they're pretty much just left paralyzed for a moment as years of information bombards their mind. So I would grab the spell, Hold Person. You do have the ability to shorten space itself to travel very, very quickly, so I would grab Misty Step, as well as the spell, Vortex Warp. You definitely can't forget things like Haste or Slow, but do your party a favor and make sure to twin cast it when you get the chance. Then one spell that fits super well, to the point that this is part of the reason I went with so many levels in Graviturgy Wizard, is the 3rd level spell, Pulse Wave. It creates intense pressure in a 30-foot cone. It pulls or pushes creatures, forcing them to make a con save, and a creature takes 6d6 force damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. Then you can still push or pull those creatures 15 feet closer or further away from you. You can do some more force damage with something like Bigby's Hand, improve your overall invulnerability even more with something like Globe of Invulnerability, completely erase people from existence with the spell Disintegrate, which does 10d6 plus 40 force damage, and if they're brought down to 0 points by that, they're completely disintegrated, like there's nothing left. Then you definitely gotta grab the spell Tasha's Otherworldly Guise. This can make you immune to a couple types of damage or conditions. It gives you a flying speed of 40 feet, it boosts your armor class by 2, and all of your weapon attacks are magical, while also allowing you to use your spellcasting modifier for the attacks. And the thing about weapon attacks is, despite the wording, unarmed strikes count as weapon attacks. They're just not weapons that you can enchant. And if you remember, we still have that feat that we never took from choosing the variant human race. So we're going to take the feat, Fighting Initiate, and grab Unarmed Fighting. This makes it so our unarmed strikes deal a d8 of damage. So if you combine that with Tasha's Otherworldly Guise, you can now fight with your charisma modifier. And the last part of the Tasha's Otherworldly Guise spell is that you can attack twice instead of once on your attack action. So now you actually have some usable form of martial arts while still being a sorcerer. There's still a few other really good spells like Reverse Gravity for the techniques you can usually pull off, and you can enhance the concept of your domain expansion with things like Plane Shift or Demi-Plane. There's really no bad options here, but I think that's how I would build Gojo in the world of Dungeons & Dragons. If there's anything you do differently, let me know in the comments down below, and if you want access to the character sheet like all of these amazing people that are scrolling by, feel free to check out my Patreon, just like the especially awesome player character patrons Natron209, Johnny Dyer, Kevin Shirley, Zephyros, That Funny Man 57, Joshua Maynard, CGC 2014, Appstorm, Elisa Martinez, Panda Milkshake, Ted Z, Andrew Nobles, Carcat Kitsune, Decker Joint, Set 13, Viral Nervarg, Daniel Galvin, and the Dino 21. Then there's the Dungeon Master level patrons I play D&D with: Shane Gilroy, Common ZX, Cybersiety, Demiurge, Salvador, Devin Happy, and Kilo Kilo. Then going above and beyond anything I ever expected is my God tier level patron, GameSteak. So a special thank you to that God tier level patron. He's pretty awesome. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here helping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to play Gojo Satoru from Jujutsu Kaisen as a Jujutsu Kaisen sorcerer in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.